three incredible professionals that are going to help us understand, hey, these really hard problems that have really complex problem sets and lots of different type of people who have to understand them, how do you get something done? There's all this uncertainty. There's all of this data mismatch. There's all these competing priorities. How do you do anything in that world? And so these three people have done incredible things in their careers, and so that's why we asked them to come and talk to you all about how do you break down those silos and actually get stuff done. And so I couldn't say, how to get shit done. So driving innovation through cross-functional alignment. That's the official title of this. I'd love for Liz, Carlo, and Curtis to come up, please. All right, and you're gonna see, there's a little bit of Pandora there. Awesome. All right, so this, unfortunately, is not gonna be super interactive. Right after this is going to be a networking, though, and I promise you're gonna get some really good ideas from these folks, and then you're gonna get to meet everybody. I have I've voluntold these people that they're gonna be available to talk. In terms of meeting people and understanding where they've come and how they get things done, I wanted to talk a little bit about professional and personal, because in my experience, relationships are everything. In the world of AI, in the world of uncertainty, nothing matters to me more than being able to trust who I work with. And that's how I get stuff done. And so I wanted to introduce our folks in ways that hopefully make you understand why are they so cool in their professional life, but also a little window into why they're so amazing people. Okay. So, Liz,
now I'm ready.
No, you're ready. Awesome. Right on time. Can you, this is relevant, tell me about a time where a functional silo really slowed things down, and what was like that most absurd or comical kind of thing that happened?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my mic falling out is a good indication of my packing skills as demonstrated there. But so I work for Pandora Jewelry. I run our North American business unit overseeing e-commerce. And we have a history of launching Christmas ornaments. It's something that our most loyal fans really, really love. And we took a pause around COVID with sending them out, and we decided 2 years ago to re-bring up this ornament. And it was a little mouse in a box, and the mouse had a little felt hat. And everyone across all of the teams, except for, as we found out later, supply chain signed off on getting this ornament to all of our different clusters across the globe. And what we didn't realize at the time was that the ornament, which is usually porcelain or made up of something that can go in our regular warehouses and distributing centers, needed to be stored at a certain temperature or else it would get really moldy. So when it came to Christmas and launching the ornaments, we did a quick quick check to see if the ornament was ready to go, and they were all covered with mold. So luckily it wasn't something that we put a lot of commercial pressure behind, but the moldy mouse has become a little bit of a catchphrase internally. So double check your temperatures when you go to store something.
I love it. Moldy mouse is a perfect example of what happens when a silo. And so then on a personal note, what's one household chore that you would outsource to another department, if you could?
The department would be my fiance, and that would be cleaning and packing and organization.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. And in true fashion, I skipped ahead a little bit. Who is Liz? What do you do? You thankfully, you're like, I'm at Pandora now, but you've worked at Wayfair, at Camping World, at Walmart. Like, I mean, awesome, incredible, varied retail experience. Kind of give us 30 seconds of how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be up here with everyone. So I'm Liz Gary, again, VP of e-commerce at Pandora Jewelry. I've spent the last 15 years or so in the digital space. Started in consulting, worked at Wayfair for a long time, had the opportunity to move out to San Francisco and work for Walmart, spent some time in the RV space at Camping World, and then most recently before Pandora was building a health and wellness startup focused on functional health that was acquired by Walgreens. So a passion for all things digital.
And just amazing rock star. If you get the chance to talk to Liz, please take it. Carlo, let me do this right. 30-second intro, please.
Yes, so Carlos Savino. I manage the e-commerce business for EMEA, North America, and Latin America at Lenovo. Lenovo, by the way, is the #1 PC manufacturer in the world, although in North America we are #3, so we're a bit of a challenger brand. And by the way, thank you for having me here, and that's a fun picture.
Where's the fourth cat?
This was a little bit ago.
Before the fourth
This
cat.
was before the
Okay.
fourth cat, yes. I'll talk a little bit more about how much I love animals here momentarily. But I have had actually a little bit more of a linear path. So before I was at Lenovo, I've been there for about almost 8 years now. I started at Dell and was there for about 20 years managing their e-commerce business. So really got to be able to go extend into much more management of the full end-to-end at Lenovo, and it's been a very gratifying journey. And I was just thinking about this. This is my dream job. It really is. It really is. Just being part of an organization that is so passionate about what we do and has such dedicated and just amazing people working for it, it's truly a pleasure to come into work every day.
Awesome. Echo later, we'll talk about like what's important, and being able to dive in and care is one of the themes for breaking down silos. All right, so Carlo, what's an innovative idea that you proposed, maybe even your own, that you should have left in a silo?
Well, I would say at Lenovo, it's very much a culture of fail fast and learn. So there's probably hundreds of examples we can have about things that we thought were good ideas at the time and became, non-value add or difficult to be able to go implement. The one I will say is the buck stops with me, so I'll give you an example of something that I was very passionate about, which was this concept of adding third-party electronics, consumer electronics, as a category to our online experience, which made sense from an adjacency standpoint. Around the PC, the consumer electronics category just in North America alone is $60 billion a year. So we thought this is a no-brainer, like easy to go set up. We're gonna have a bunch of people coming and buying, and we'll tie it into our loyalty program. Well, lo and behold, that's a really complicated business to break into. And I had no idea just the operational complexity. I had no idea how important the relationship portion, and frankly, just being kind of the upstart and having to go fight for inventory on critical SKUs is a day-to-day knife fight. So we couldn't get Xboxes when it launched. We couldn't get PlayStations. So it became a very challenging business. We still have it. It's part of our core strategy. But I think it's just a realization that you can have the best intentions and realize that, holy moly, some of these things are really hard to get done.
Yes, absolutely. Inventory management and what may happen with tariffs, I'll be leading a panel later today if you want to get depressed with me there. Okay. And Carlo, what's the most innovative, questionable cooking experiment you've ever attempted?
I don't cook. I'm terrible at it. But what I was
all of them.
I'm sorry. I'm a very simple person. I like very simple things. But I was thinking about perhaps the worst dining experience I've ever had.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to understanding your customer and just completely whiffing on it. And we were at a dinner in Las Vegas at CES a couple of years ago. Went to a hot pot place, which if you haven't had hot pot, very interesting, very unique Chinese cultural thing. But at the end of it, they brought out what looked like just a fantastic seafood tower. Beautiful seafood tower, lobster, crab, etc. And I am by nature a person that very much loves animals. And I was a zoology major in college, so very much, I'm a carnivore by maybe force rather than interest, and the cognitive dissonance of not really appreciating where your food comes from, that works for me. So anyway, in this seafood tower, which looked fantastic at the time, I noticed that the lobster was moving.
Oh.
And that was a bit of a freak out session
Sure.
because, I can't imagine wanting to kill something to eat it.
Yeah.
I let other people do that. I know it's a terrible example, but I had to walk away, and it just occurred to me that in what world would that be just something that a fine dining place would do? It was an interesting experience.
Oh, great answer. Okay, all right. Curtis,
Yes.
30 seconds.
Okay, I'm Curtis. I'm at Wayfair right now. I lead the FinTech and Loyalty organization, and what we're responsible for is payment processing, fraud detection and prevention. We also own our stack of payment products, things like gift cards, buy now, pay later, our co-branded credit card relationships, and we have a financing marketplace as well. Before Wayfair, I was at Amazon for 6 years. All of that is financial services partnerships something. We're talking about silos and cross-functional work. I'm a cross-functional guy. I actually started in this space as a finance guy. Then I did business development. Then I became a GM. So I've kind of gotten to rotate around, and I have enjoyed that very much.
Awesome. All right. Imagine your different departments as characters in a sitcom. I know we've workshopped this, so I'm
We've
ready.
workshopped
I'm so excited. All right. What's a classic comedic misunderstanding that they would have due to a misalignment?
Okay, so I'm not sure of the Venn diagram between like fraud conference attendees and Golden Girls fans.
It's a circle.
So for some reason, the comedy I kept coming back to is the Golden Girls. So if you don't know it, it's Golden. It's from 1985, and it's about 4 senior citizen women. And the oldest woman, she's probably 90 in the show, maybe 85. That's Sophia. She's the mom, and she's just kind of old school, and she knows how to get stuff done. And so her daughter Dorothy, imagines herself that she's like modern and she's read up on everything, and she's always trying new stuff. And so I kind of think of my tech team actually as Sophia the mom. They're veterans. They do this for a living. They've been doing it a long time. They're experts, and they're like, Curtis, this is how you do that. And then I'm kind of a bit of Dorothy, where I'm like, hey, I met with this vendor. They've got this great new product. This is going to be amazing. So anywho, I hope you enjoy Golden Girls as much as I do, or that probably didn't make a ton of sense.
It did. It resonated, and in this analogy, I'm Blanche, so we're all happy. All right. So, all right, in your own household, what's an alignment issue that you have with the other members?
Yeah, so my husband and I do a pretty good job splitting up chores. The one thing that always seems to fall through the cracks is helping our daughter with homework, and she doesn't mind at all. He always thinks I helped her. I always think he helped her, and she's like quiet on the whole situation. So we could probably benefit from more organization in that next
Shared KPIs.
Yes.
We'll talk about that later. Okay, all right. Okay, all right, into the more, all right, let's get to the meat of it. We're off to a great start. I love this. All right, what are some of the biggest challenges or missed opportunities that when you have functional silos that are not working well, kind of why do we care? Let's start with the why. What do you see when things don't work?
Yeah, I think, so Pandora is a global business, and all of our engineering and tech teams sit in Denmark, in Copenhagen, where we're headquartered. And where we see prominent misalignment happen within our space is when there are decisions being made at the 30,000-foot level, and we don't bring in those local nuances, those details, solicit feedback around, okay, we are going to deploy a strategy on building a new returns portal. And we believe that this is the biggest opportunity. Well, maybe it's not the biggest opportunity for specific clusters. So we definitely live through growing pains of understanding how do we align at the 30,000-foot view to make sure that we capture those local priorities or local nuances, because each country has different legislature that they have to follow, different rules they have to follow, different customer set. So I think that ability to align at the highest level to the lowest level is something that we are constantly working through.
Right. And Carlo, you know, in your purview, you have dozens of different markets and regions, and of course, global Lenovo. So how does what Liz just said kind of resonate, or how do you think about that exact problem?
Well, I think what's interesting is, and I think Liz and even Curtis have maybe challenges in this notion of omnichannel. When we start to think about customer behavior, we start to think about how that is changing and evolving over time, and the need for us to be much more customer-centric. At Lenovo, it's interesting because our organization is a little separate and independent than the broader Lenovo organization, and what I mean by that is, like most people at Lenovo don't understand e-commerce. It's very complicated, and so they sort of leave us to our own devices, which is very nice. But unfortunately, there are times where I think that maybe there's a separate set of strategies that are cascaded not only from the very top of the organization, but also down into functional and geographic silos. And that's one of the things that we've continued to sort of challenge, is this notion of, as a disruptor within a legacy, channel and retail business, how do we make sure that we are talking about customers and owning customers and really advancing a point of view that says there are changes that are happening demographically, psychographically, that we have to pay attention to. And so I think part of it is understanding that there are differences in go-to-market, which drive different sort of ideas about what success looks like in different geographies. EMEA is a perfect example of a place that is extraordinarily channel-centric, and we are trying to go build something direct. So I think it's a matter of continuing to go educate people. But more importantly, the way we look at it is, if we say we're going to go do something at Lenovo, we go do it. And it really, this notion of sort of building credibility over time, being accountable to sort of what you say you're going to go do, gives us a little bit of sort of forward momentum. And that's the way that we sort of approached this problem.
Certainty is almost everything.
Yes.
It's foundational, at least. It's necessary. Curtis, Anything you want to add there, or can I ask you about Wayfair's first store, and then its 10 next stores?
Let's talk stores.
I love it. All right, so you have 11 stores now. You run payments and loyalty. What was that like to go? It's the exact inverse, right, of Lenovo, which is like, I'd never really understood D2C. And now you're like, we were D2C, and now we have stores. What's that like?
Yeah, so when we talk about breaking down silos, most customers who've met Wayfair met us online. Wayfair, we're in 4 different countries, in the UK and Ireland. We're in Canada and US. And when customers come to our site, they're going to make their first purchase. They're going to save their payment details. Maybe they sign up for our loyalty program or our credit card, and they've got a bank of points. Maybe they've signed up to special financing, and they want access to that when they show up in the store. And so when you start launching physical stores, if you just start with a really simple vision of when your known customers walk through that door, they want to know that you know them, right? So do you know my shipping address? You probably should already. I certainly want to use my points if I have them, right? So if I've joined your loyalty program and I've got $100 sitting there waiting for me, I want that waiting for me when I get into the store. And so, I'm super proud of the team, and not just my team, the whole org. I hope you get a chance, if you're in Chicago, go to our new Wayfair store, come to any of them all over the country. They're lovely. But when you walk in, we're going to take those details, make sure you have access to them. We're going to make you feel known and appreciated. I think that's really important, and that took not just a payments team, not just a fraud team, but now you're talking about associate training in the store. You're talking about folks who are making signage in a store to advertise what's going on with your loyalty program, gift card balances, the whole bit. So, something like that, a very simple customer experience of your customer wants to feel known and recognized when they walk through the store. Then you have to forget about your org structure and the silos, and you just have to align on that vision and build your community and deliver.
So in the prep, as we were talking about this exact question, someone said, make the customer the center of everything, and like everything else will solve. And I'm like, that resonates with me. I'm the chief customer officer. Yes. And so we'll come back to that theme in a bit. But all right, so we know the why, right? There's these problems that happen. There's all these cool opportunities that happen. When you execute well, you can have incredible growth. When things don't go so well, you have to fail fast so that it doesn't cost too much. But how do you think about knowing whether you're successful or not? Because one of the problems with silos is, let's take the region, right? Okay, region A and region B are like, we're so different, we're unique, you can't tell us to do the same things. And then it's like, well, but at the end of the day, we sell stuff. Are we efficiently selling stuff? Do our customers love us or not? And how do you get to some common understanding? Anybody want to go first?
Sure.
Yes.
So I think one of the areas that we started with was, Carlo, you mentioned like education. So Pandora has always been a very stores first business. However, 90% of consumers who are actively in the jewelry market start their experience online, whether that's to get a sense of what local stores are near them, to understand price points, quality, material composition, et cetera. So we had to do a lot of education to understand why it was important for us to think agnostically about our channels. And I think, Carlos, you mentioned, you don't want to show your Curtis, you mentioned you don't want to show your org structure to your customer. That's the biggest mistake. And so how do you do that? So we spent a lot of time actually thinking about how we educate our internal stakeholders around why we all have to walk north together. And so what that distilled down to is locally having shared KPIs with our cross-functional partners, primarily our merchandising partners who control inventory, pricing, product availability, et cetera, promotional calendar, and then our marketing teams. One of our big ambitions is our mission as a brand is to give a voice to people's loves. But you have to earn trust to earn the right to celebrate someone's anniversary, birthday, the birth of a child, et cetera. So there's a lot of movement around changing our brand perception, which has completely changed our marketing strategy, where we're investing dollars, and that has an impact on kind of commercial KPIs to a degree. So we've spent a lot of time both on educating the internal community as to why we have to think about a multi-channel approach when we go into a selling strategy, and then locally deploying a series of shared KPIs to make sure, okay, a decision over here that's going to impact something over here, we're aligned to that. We expect that. So when we see bumps, dips, spikes in performance, nothing's a surprise. So I think that education, that shared KPI and goaling has been really important for our success.
As a follow-up, how do you think about people who are like, you know what, my region's, it's that age-old question of like the specifics versus the generalizable. And the reason I ask is because we at Signifyd struggle, every organization struggles with this. We have GMs for our different regions, but we all have the same KPIs. It took us a long time to get there, to agree and to understand and to have the context of, well, in this region, LATAM is very different from EMEA, is very different from NORAM, is very different from APAC. Let's just stay at the regions because it's nice and simple and clean. The authorization rates, the chargeback rates, everything, the performance, the customer expectations are all different, and it took us probably 2 years. How, in your experience, maybe how long does it kind of take to get alignment on shared KPIs in your experience? It took, for example, it took us about 2 years. I'm curious.
Yeah, I would say similar, probably 1.5 to 2 years. And I think how you do that more successfully is, we talk a lot about storytelling at Pandora. How do you transcend the meaning of a butterfly charm outside of just the fact that it's a butterfly and can stand a lot of different things? So we spend a lot of time internally thinking about how you articulate the why. So I think for us, it was really distilling down, we can do this thing, however, it's gonna impact these 5 different teams. Do we have the right people in the room? So ensuring that we have the right advocates, and that art of storytelling has been important for us. But similar, it took about 1.5 years.
Yeah. We'll come back to this theme of like real institutional change. How does it happen? How long does it take? Can you make it faster? But just wanted to kind of throw that in. Carlo, in terms of cross-functional alignment efforts, I saw you smiling when I was like, different regions, how do you think about numbers and like understanding context?
Yeah, well, I'm honored to have a couple of sort of the Lenovo folks in the audience here, and I think that they can deeply appreciate the complexity around a global sort of business and all the nuances. And I was just smiling because my country GM for Brazil is in the audience, and Brazil is by far the most complicated region I have ever done business in for a variety of reasons. And one of the things that I think was interesting was, and I'll bring it back to this kind of the partnership that we had with Signifyd, was that we sort of piloted this idea of how do we reduce fraud, how do we reduce our sort of chargeback rates, how do we drive more conversions on our website, and we started this in North America, and we saw great success. And as we were talking, as the team was talking about global expansion, the question, there were a lot of questions about nuance, about the complexity of the Brazil payment business, from installments to different types of payments to, frankly, just I would say, the rampant fraud that happens in Brazil, I think, which is a sort of a known, fraud is very complex, et cetera. So there was a little bit of reluctance early on to, trust that somebody could come in, and perhaps a US-based business, and understand the complexity of a Brazil business. And I think it took a little bit of convincing, but in general, when we sort of coalesce around an idea, we have a lot of discretion at agency to be able to get it done. And I'll finish this up, but I'll just have a quick sidebar, which is this notion of everything from the customer back is something that is deeply ingrained, at least in our direct business, because we own the customer. And so that we have to figure out ways to be able to go improve customer experience. And one of the really cool things about working at Lenovo is how much agency we're given. It's a very entrepreneurial organization. And by and large, there are some exceptions, by and large, if there's a problem, we just go solve it. I mean, there's a lot of orchestration between IT and payments and back-end infrastructure and even the geographies. But this was one of those cases where clearly there was a value that was coming from a business like, or partnership like Signifyd, and then finally working with the Brazil team and the Latin American teams to overcome that sort of sensitivity or concern. But I will say that the only other thing, and I'll finish up on here, is I think it was extraordinarily bold for Signifyd to take a chance on us in Brazil.
No.
I really do, because it is I mean, it is a very complex business, and there's a lot of sort of day-to-day management, minute-by-minute management, and it's been a very good relationship. And honestly, we have been so proud of the success, and grateful for the success. So it's been good. So
Wow, amazing. I did not pay him to say that. But what I would say is to echo, what I have loved that working with Lenovo that has done is benchmark and said, let's just get better on these metrics and meet people where they are in their business. We're still measuring the same things. Let's just get better. And that, to me, that simplicity, that clarity of knowing what to care about, rather than saying, I want everybody at this bar. No, let's all just get better on these things that matter to our business. Let's make sure our customers love us more. Let's get more sold, and let's have less risk. Translating that into actual business outcomes, I think, is one of the key things that you can do to make sure that silos don't impede.
Agreed.
Anything to add on this, Curtis?
Just two quick concepts. One on KPIs, just kind of taking apart what's an input KPI and what's an output KPI. I think a lot of times you just kind of anchor on, what number am I trying to move, and you watch that number. It's really helpful to think about 3 or 4 KPIs that are going to drive that. And so just getting a really, talk to your team members, like what are the inputs that are going to make that output KPI move? So we spend time thinking about that. And then the other concept is just kind of macro KPIs. When you live in a silo or a world or a function, you can really focus on your business. But sometimes your org is, really fragmented, or different people own different things. So taking a step back and understanding KPIs from other orgs, and then taking a step all the way back and saying, how is my business doing? And just so folks don't live in their bubble into their silo and say, hey, we're taking market share, and that's really impressive, and here's all the things that add up to that, and then here's how our business is contributing to that. So when I think about KPIs, it really is the inputs and the outputs, and then making sure the team has a really good perspective of just what's going on outside of your neck of the woods, whether it's your sister team or whether it's your entire business.
Yeah. And then the inverse of this, we've talked about, okay, how do you measure, how do you get everybody on the same page? What does it feel like when people aren't on the same page? Like, what's a subtle that maybe you've kind of learned in your career? There's a disconnect here. Liz, you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it becomes very quickly like a finger-pointing game, oftentimes. In our business, we're constantly chasing for the basis point changes, right? A couple basis points of conversion, lowering bounce rate by a couple basis points. But in order to do that, it takes an army of everyone going in the right direction. And I think when you have that misalignment or lack of clarity, it very quickly becomes a finger-pointing game. So we tend to spend a lot of time on kind of, tactical pulse checks. How does this feel? Are you clear around how your work impacts this goal? Do you have clarity on what those input metrics are? Because it just creates so much disillusion between what you're actually trying to achieve, which is your customer, and they're not in the room all the time.
Yeah, that resonates with me so much. So we use Culture Amp for our employees, and one of my favorite KPIs, metrics to measure is, do I understand why what my job does and what my day-to-day does and my month-to-month does contributes to my customers and to Signifyd success? And that has been really high for and improving, and I'm like, yes, that's what I care about. Carlo, in terms of types of problems, is there a type of problem that you see often run into silos and so maybe it's a certain type of a technology, or it's a certain type of a problem set? I, for example, think of fraud, abuse, returns as a problem that has it's end to end. If it's on fire, it's the only thing people don't want to talk about, but you have to talk about it. If it's working, though, everything else is cleaner. My CAC is cleaner, my marketing is cleaner, my customer call center is cleaner, my return logistics are cleaner, and so then it can be kind of invisible when it's working, and it's hard to know who owns the whole end-to-end when it's not working.
Yep.
And it's very cross-functional. I could be biased. Is there another example of like these types of problems often run into silos?
I can give some specific examples of problems that we are facing right now that are clearly we are seeing clear divisions and fiefdoms and silos being generated, and we have to sort of overcome those. The big one for us is we are undergoing what I would say is a very significant marketing transformation, just a different marketing philosophy. And one of the things that's been most challenging for us is for people who have for years we have entrusted with agency and discretion and decision-making rights to be able to go drive towards performance marketing outcomes. It's very different when we're having conversations about paying less attention, for example, to ROAS in marketing, and more moving up funnel to be able to go drive consideration, brand awareness, et cetera. And that has created a lot of things that are actually more overt than just subtle. And I think, what it comes down to me is I think about just general problems and how to go solve them. In many cases, I think most people in an organization, across every single organization, one, care very deeply about being successful and are very competitive. But I think there's also an element of they want to feel like they are contributing, that they want to feel like they have decision-making rights or authority, or that they have utility in the broader organization. And so one of the things that we are trying to go clean up, quite frankly, is communication of the strategy, the whys behind the reasons why we're asking to go do things. Because I truly believe that if we can explain why we think the way we do and allow for debate, and get people to understand that these are not arbitrary decisions, we're not trying to make unilateral decisions, that there's a reason behind them, I think it gets people to be more willing to take chances and get into uncomfortable places. So that's kind of what I was, when I was thinking about sort of fiefdoms and organizational silos and some of the things we're seeing, it happens, and you can definitely feel the malaise or inertia that gets built. Part of it is, how do we start to go communicate better from the top down to make sure everybody feels like we're rowing in the same direction?
So well said, and so important. That leads us to our next question, actually, which, so a concrete strategy or initiatives or kind of structural things that you put into place to really break down silos or foster better communication. So clear strategy, context, why, explaining to people so that they understand what are we trying to achieve. Oh, this piece of what I'm working on is a massive, important, necessary part of this broader strategy. The whole thing is depending on me. I'm still in my silo, but I understand how I need to work together, and I can drive that. I understand how my KPIs drive the broader KPIs. Any other kind of strategies or kind of structural things? Liz?
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time making sure that we have clear alignment at the top. Because we are a global company and decision makers sit in a lot of different locations, we found this consistent habit of, maybe we had 9 of 10 of the key decision makers in the room, and the 10th person was like, what is this big initiative that's coming down, and how are we going to do this? So we've put different structures into place to make sure that we actually have a steering committee as we go into long-range planning. And there's multiple kind of checks and balances to ensure that we have clear understanding and visibility of the value chain internally. I think it's sometimes easier to think about the external value chain, how you display and market and go to market with all the different value props you offer to a customer. But we've spent a lot of time actually thinking about what that means internally. So having all of the stakeholders from a tops to tops level involved, aligned, they create delegates of who are the working teams that are actually going to go off and do this work, and then actually putting forth checks and balances along the way to make sure that the teams are encouraged to actually drive the work and inspired to drive the work, and the leaders are just enabling and getting out of the way. Yeah.
Curtis, you had some very strong thoughts about, and I, in my notes wrote, he said, write it down. Do you want to expound on that?
Yeah, so just 2 kind of basic hygiene things that I think help our organization. One is MBRs, and 2 is write it down when it gets to like org structure. So we do monthly business reviews, and it doesn't matter if it's for fraud performance, or our payment processing performance, or what's going on in our lending space. And when we think about who to invite to those sessions, we invite our engineers, we invite product, we invite those folks within our org who touch those products, so everybody gets a view of that. I think sometimes what happens is, maybe you're a frontline engineer and you may never see the KPI, right? So how do you make sure that as you talk about how your business is doing, that all your stakeholders are participating in that and have visibility into it? And we invite folks who are not in our org. So, I know some organizations have something called trust and safety, and that's one big umbrella org. Some orgs have, a refunds and a scam and a customer service team, and then they have an info security team that might be protecting their servers, and then somebody else in treasury is doing payments. So we really do try to think about who is your community, who are the folks that you're going to need to call if something is going wrong, who do you want to keep up to date with when things are going well. So the MBRs is one, and then when I talk about write it down, it really is have roles and responsibilities, a RACI. It doesn't have to be rigid, but give folks a place to start and say, this is what you own. A lot of times you get a job description, you get a job, and then a year or two later, your org has evolved. The needs of the org have changed, and you're doing different things. So just taking a beat to actually write it down, saying, here's the team, here's who owns what, and it gives folks a place to start, and then if there's some churn or some confusion, escalate and keep punching through.
Yeah. It resonated with me in terms of clarity, certainty, and context, which is how I summarized this section. Carlo, in terms of technology or platforms, I know that Lenovo has been on this worldwide tear of standardization as much as possible. Has that helped you all to kind of facilitate these? The reason I ask is we all just talked about people and all those types of things. Technology has a role. You want to expound on that?
Yeah, I think absolutely it does. And I think this notion of trying to go drive some consistency across our global businesses is both a labor of love as well as sort of longer term, a way to be able to go drive consistency in sales reporting, to go drive consistency in go-to-market, and in conversations. And quite frankly, when you think about the complexity around tech debt and throwaway IT work, this notion of trying to go build one single platform across different parts of our business is extraordinarily valuable, because what we've started to go build is a deploy once globally, or kind of build once and then deploy globally, which has been much more satisfying and frankly value add than we've seen in our prior sort of platform instances. But if you don't mind, I'd like to go back, because Curtis, you said something that I thought that resonated with me as well. And I'm sure you guys can appreciate this. I look forward to Black Friday and Cyber Monday unlike any other time of the year. It is Super Bowl. Like I would sit in a cot. I would lay in the office if I could, just to be there the entire time. It's like a rocket ship taking off every hour. And what you said reminded me of this culture that we built within our engineering teams and our analytics teams and our category teams and our merchandising teams around just wanting to be successful on this one day. Just there's so much opportunity and so much demand. So we had engineers sitting in Beijing, we had developers sitting in Argentina, we had developers sitting in India, analytics people across the world on a call for literally 72 hours straight. And we would all celebrate when we hit a milestone or when we exceeded an hourly phasing. And this notion of sort of the shared enjoyment of just being successful when it comes to something as simple as driving $1 of revenue, I think also gets people very excited about longer term, seeing the connection between the work that they're doing in these silos, in these different parts of the organization, and how it connects to the sort of broader market and broader business outcomes. And so that's one of the things that I'm most proud of, is this coordination and collaboration between very discrete and different parts of the organization in the most important part of the year. So it's it's just a cool thing to see.
I think you're in the right business, Carlo. All right. We've talked a lot about kind of structure and how you think about things, and then also we've talked about technology, but leadership and kind of how to think about the people is something that is very important. The first 90 days, I think multiple of you all mentioned that as a book that you would recommend. We'll have it in kind of the notes for the session, so you can go check it out. But the gist of it is, hey, in your first 90 days, you need to understand how the org makes decisions. You go and start a new job. And different organizations, Amazon, Walmart, Signifyd, any of these places that you all have worked, how things actually happen is different, and you need to understand that. And so how do you think about when you go and you're in a new role or you're starting a new project, what's one of the first things you all do? And you're like in the mind of, I need to get stuff done. Where do you start? Anyone want to, Carlo, you want to go first?
I'm going to let Liz talk.
Liz, all right, Liz, go.
I didn't know this was the starting chair.
Apparently.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I tend to do is I take a stab at building out what I believe is my 30, 60, 90, but immediately seek clarity on like what is my remit? Where do I sit in the organization? How are decisions being made? What do I own versus influence? How am I going to be evaluated? What are the success metrics? I think it's very easy to identify financially, what are you supposed to do? Here's your target, here's your EBIT goals, et cetera. But it's all of the inputs that go into that. So understanding, I think, the domino, where do you fit in the game of dominoes, is really important. And then what is the type of check-in conversations that you need to have in order to make sure that you're going off in the right direction, that you have that evaluation and that conversation back and forth, and document that. Is this what you mean by this? Is a decision confirmed if this person says it in a meeting, or does it need to be formally documented? So making sure that you have clarity on what is your remit, where do you sit in the value chain of decision making, and then how do you have clarity on checks and balances as it relates to your own evaluation, I think is critical.
Mm-hmm. Carlos is passing the buck. Curtis.
Oh, wow. Okay. So when we get started, when I call them asteroids, right? So you make your annual plan, and everybody's got a plan, and you're doing your life, and then an asteroid hits. Somebody somewhere in your world has said, this thing has changed. And so some of the things we do is we try to evaluate how does that actually fit with the things we're already doing, right? Is it a real asteroid? Are we going to get there one cycle from now? Are we going to get there 3 months from now? So one of our first exercises, okay, is it an asteroid? How disruptive is this really? We pressure test timelines. We get really crisp about trade-offs, right? So, okay, let's communicate with our folks. Here's what we signed up for. Here's the business results we signed up for. Here's the bandwidth we're consuming across all these different orgs, and now this asteroid has hit, and cool, we got it. We're going to handle this for everyone. But what does that mean, right? And how do I need to communicate? All right, well, we're going to lose 5% on this KPI, or, my bandwidth requirements are going to change over there. So we just try to do some, inbound triage before that sets up, and then, identify your stakeholders, get really clear on what success looks like. How are we going to be measured? Do we all have the same sense of where we're headed? And then do you have the right stakeholders, right? Like, have we built the right community for this particular project or problem? Yeah.
I know we're running out of time, so I'll give you a very brief answer. So I think in the introduction of every organization, I think it's important to be able to go sort of understand the KPIs, understand the organization, understand the people there, and understand who are the decision makers. I agree with all of that. The way I approach things is I ask a lot of questions, and usually with a point to get to the end. But I do think that one of the things that I've recognized, and I'll stop here, is I wanted to share this one thing, which is so many people, we talk about BMS, we talk about everybody being part of meetings and conversations, et cetera. I think the reality is that I've had to learn over time is that all of the important decisions that are made in every organization I've ever been in do not happen at the table. They happen in the mini conversations that lead up to the table, and by the time you get to the table to make a decision, frankly, it's already made. Maybe there's some nuance in it, but I think that's part of it is just of changing my behaviors and the way that I approach business outcomes and business questions and problem solving is how do I get alignment with the people that matter so that when we get to the big table, we're all in agreement, we've hashed it out, we've debated, we've yelled at each other, but we're all friends trying to go solve the same problem.
Yeah, I think alignment on the problems and then clarity on the things that matter would be the thing that I would leave you with. All right, so we are officially ready to network. And so that's what we're going to do, and so we're going to have a little bit of a break. Hopefully you can, take some of these thoughts, meet people who are here. The crew here at Flow is amazing. These folks will be available. I would love to talk to anyone who wants to chat about these things. But welcome to Flow. It's a pleasure to have you. Later on, I'll be toasting folks and we'll be going on a cruise. So hopefully I'll see you on the boat. But welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Bennett. Listen, big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, panelists.